Yeah, nice to meet you. Nice
Yeah,
to meet
nice
you.
to meet you. This is a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. How is yoga? That'll go well.
Oh, I fucked it up.
Uh, of course, of course.
Yeah, that's my joke whenever anyone asks me how was my swim, how was my yoga, how was everything. I say I fucked it up. So.
When did you start getting into that, like kind of swimming and yoga and?
Oh, I mean, living on a boat in my 20s, I swim. I had to swim a lot. So, in order to get to shore, Uh, but I wasn't a very good swimmer actually. I couldn't do the crawl when I lived at the bar. I didn't learn how to do the crawl until I went to NYU, and I remember I went to the gym. I joined the gym there at NYU, and in my early 30s, and I would just watch other people doing the crawl because I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I could do the breaststroke. I could do that was the main thing, breaststroke, I guess. But then I watched people do the crawl, and now I can do the crawl. So I guess I was mostly swimming underwater. Uh, when I was swimming to go check my anchors was the thing. So I had to. That's all. I really just had to get down. I had to get down below. It wasn't a distance thing. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I grew up in Maryland, so swimming was big there.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I've been doing it since I was like 6. I don't do it now, even with, but yeah, always that
Yeah.
good stuff.
Then
But
I
yeah,
got in, then I got into yoga in my probably mid 30s. I had a girlfriend who was taught yoga, or yeah, somehow. So she got me a sort of a practice doing it. Now it's just yeah, it's just sort of a regular thing. So
that's great. Yeah. Yeah, when you said that, I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot this guy's like a Brooklyn yuppie," Like I forgot that was your yoga class in the morning, But
oh man, a Brooklyn yuppie. That's harsh. Man.
oh no, I
Jesus.
meant it in the
Wow.
most endearing terms. Yeah,
Yeah, how could you be endearing about a Brooklyn yuppie? That's terrible. Yeah, right out of the gate. Right out of the gate, man.
right,
Jesus.
right. It's my nerves. It's my nerves. Yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
This is Andrew Whitstadt, and you were listening to Heavy Bored, and we're recording this on September 28th, 2024. My guest today is Nick Flynn. Nick is a poet, playwright, memoirist, musician, and all-around literary rock star whose work has appeared in every publication there is in the world of literature. He is the author of 13 books, 6 poetry collections, his most recent titled Low, out from Grey Wolf in 2023, and several memoirs, the most recent of which is titled This is the Night Our House Will Catch Fire, out from Norton in 2020. But Nick Flynn is a writer who is hard to capture by just rattling off his awards and publications. And he has many listeners, including the coveted Guggenheim and Library of Congress fellowships, as well as the Penn Martha Albrand Award for his debut memoir from 2004, Another Bullshit Night in Suck City, which was turned into a film starring Robert De Niro and Paul Dano, which we will get to, listeners. But more importantly, Nick Flynn is one of my literary heroes. As many of you have heard me say before, whenever I'm asked who are some writers I look up to, Nick Flynn is usually the first name out of my mouth. I first discovered his poetry when I was a college student, getting into the art form for the very first time. I picked up Some Ether, his debut poetry collection from 1999, at the recommendation of a friend, and I never looked back. I went on to devour every collection of poetry he put out. Blind Huber, a criminally underrated collection of poems. The Captain Asks for a Show of Hands, which we previously covered on this podcast. My Feelings, and I Will Destroy You. I couldn't get enough. Nick has been an invaluable inspiration to me and my own work since I first discovered the art forms of serious writing. And I know I'm not the only one, listeners. And I say this without any hesitation or caveats or hedging, dear listeners. With my full chest, Nick Flynn is the most innovative and boundary-pushing American poet alive. No one else comes close, listeners. And I say this not because I have him here in front of me, but because it's true. And that makes Nick a very unusual writer. A writer who has the rare combination of being incredibly daring and bold, while deeply original. The type of writer who takes risks, ranging from brutal confessional to tender sentimental, and everything in between. And it is perhaps the greatest pleasure in the history of this podcast to welcome him on Heavy Board today. Nick, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board.
Andrew, that's quite something to live up to, that introduction.
You deserve it.
I mean,
yeah.
You've had a lot of you've covered a lot of great poetry on this podcast, so I'm very honored to hear that over the top introduction.
I find it best to butter up the guest before we.
I know.
No, but I meant every word of it too. Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't say that I was criminally overrated. I mean, that would have been bad. Like, it's much better to be criminally underrated, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, that book in particular, I think, it's the one everybody talks about, the big books and all that. I was like, that one is the one that doesn't get enough love when people talk about your work. So I had to put it out there, put it on the record, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, it's actually had a little bit of a life. Like it's sort of selling. It still sells because I think people have discovered it as an eco-poetics book, a book of eco-poetics. Right. And eco-poetics is, was sort of before eco-poetics was a thing. And now people are like teaching it as a form of eco-poetics, which I think is really great. So it's nice to see this young, this sort of somewhat underappreciated younger sibling get some love. Yeah. So.
I'd like to take a little bit of credit for that if I've been talking it up since I've had this podcast, but of course.
And maybe I owe you some money then.
Hey, if you want to say Venmo, I'll take it.
Yeah. But the poetry money isn't real money though, so you don't have to worry about that. So.
Oh yeah.
I could split my advances with you, and you still wouldn't really. You still have to keep your job. So.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Yeah. Nick, I always start this off with the same question for all writers, which is basically, I want to know, and you've written about this extensively in your various memoirs and stuff, but just to give listeners kind of an idea, I like to ask, what was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Like, how did this kind of early years start to form Nick Flynn?
Sure. I mean, what do you include as early years? Can I go into my 20s, or should I just keep it with like really early stuff?
As detailed or as vague as you want, I always say. Yeah. Or as harrowing, you can do deep confession or, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just sort of touch on a few things. I mean, I grew up in a small town on the Massachusetts coast called Situate. It's a very beautiful place, but it's a bit haunted for me. I don't go back very much. I don't spend the night there. I haven't spent a night there in years, but it is very beautiful. I can see it. I brought my daughter back there to show it to her, to show her where I'm from, and it's on the ocean. It wasn't a rich town when I grew up. I mean, there were wealthy people there, but it seemed like mostly like working people, like carpenters and things like that. People just working on each other's houses, and then some people would commute into the big city, into Boston, but it took about an hour to get there. So. A lot of people just worked in the town. It seemed like, at least the people I knew, they sort of just worked in the town and did, there were fishermen and there were, carpenters and stuff like that, landscapers, things like that. And it was, there was something like we weren't a big, is that your dog?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to.
Oh, this is the most unprofessional podcast you've ever been on. There's going to be a dog in the background. I have an infant, so you're going to hear her crying. Yeah.
You have an infant? How old's your infant?
Literally just about 3 weeks. It was just a few weeks ago. Yeah.
fucking kidding me. Congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Yeah, I have a few questions about fatherhood. Yeah.
What's her name? What's her name?
L.
Oh, beautiful name. Wow, that's great. That's great.
Thank
you. You haven't had any sleep. You're still like in the beautiful hallucination stage, right?
Yes.
Everything, hallucination. None of this is real anymore. Okay, so you should have told me that, because that's a whole different thing. Wow. So my childhood stuff was how does one become a poet? I don't really know. Like from that childhood, like there was nothing pointing toward poetry. There was no poetry really in my life. It wasn't like we weren't a book. We had books around my house, but they weren't like, the center of the life. They weren't like, they were sort of dusty books in the shelves, and there were a few books we had in my mother's bed. She did keep Ariel, Sylvia Plath's Ariel. I remembered that very clearly next to her bed, which is, everyone's favorite, sad poet. And so that was there, but I don't think I looked at it. I didn't look at it. I sort of knew the book, but I didn't look at it. My grandmother had like books up in her attic that were just sort of stored away from her divorce, and they were sort of hard to get to. You had to cross the joists, in between pink insulation. You had to do like tightrope across to this sort of shelf. They were just sort of like laid against the wall on the shelf, all these books. And I spent time looking at those. I sort of went up there. There was a couch up there for some reason. It was a completely unfinished attic, and I would get a book and take it and look through it and stuff. And I thought that was interesting. But there was a bookstore in our town. And, I remember the first book. I remember buying a book because I liked horror stuff. I was kind of a morbid child. And the first poem I memorized was, they asked us to memorize a poem in 5th grade or 6th grade. And I memorized, Poe's The Raven, which is quite a long poem. And, it was an ambitious thing to do, but I really liked Poe. Those morbid horror stories. I really liked them. So, but I remember like a few years before that, I had bought a book at the bookstore, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by I think it's Robert Louis Stevenson. I think, maybe. I forget right now. But
facts don't matter on this podcast. Yeah, well,
facts don't matter. Yeah,
listeners will put it in the comments. They'll be like, "Well, actually, Nick didn't know this."
Yeah. Be kind. So I bought that book, and then I took it home because I really liked. I think I'd seen the movie. I knew about it, and I was like, "Oh, there's a book of this." And I brought it home, and I couldn't read it. I couldn't read like the first page of it. I was too young, and I'm like, "Okay, in 2 years, I'm going to be able to read this." And then 2 years later, I read the whole book. It was really exciting. It was an exciting thing. But almost everything I know about reading and writing came outside of school. Like I don't remember anything of school. I'm kind of a terrible parent in a way. Our daughter's 16 now, and I'm just sort of like, high school doesn't matter. Like, you're not going to remember any of it anyway. She's sort of like, she's really into it, and she seems to remember it all. She's much more present than I was. I mean, she's much more like just emotionally and just in this world and just sort of taking the world in a way that I never did. I don't remember anything from my childhood. I remember stuff outside of school. I read books outside of school. I read books you weren't supposed to read outside of school, and I wrote things outside of school, and that's all I remember is from that. So it was it wasn't part of what we did in school at all. And not that there were good English teachers. I remember my school those were the only people I really liked was the English classes. I didn't understand anything else. It was just I didn't have many other options because there was nothing else I really could do or wanted to do. And so I was always just thinking like for some reason that I would be a writer. Hard to say why. It just sort of that's what appealed to me. Language appealed to me, and the idea of building something from words, like creating a world from words, just seemed really kind of magical. I think maybe because the world I was in was difficult, and to create this alternate reality seemed like a really nice way out. And so I'd go to bookstores. There was a bookstore I'd go live in. I'd just sit and read all the books. And once I got locked in there, like at lunchtime, the person just left. They didn't notice me there, and I realized I I could have just walked out with all the books I wanted because it was, but I didn't do it. And I was a little thief too, but I didn't want to steal from this bookstore because I was like, I need to be able to come back here. I need to be able to come back to this bookstore. So it'd be very bad if I did that. But now, the reason I asked about going into my 20s was just that lately I'm writing a book now about being in my 20s, and there's been a box of notebooks in my attic for, years now that I've been reluctant to open. I just didn't want to know who that person was. And now in the last month or so, I've gotten the box, I've read a bunch of the notebooks, and I'm sort of getting reintroduced to who I was in my 20s, which is really an fascinating thing. I wasn't as bad a person as I thought I'd be. Somehow I thought I'd be, I don't know, because I was also like a little, it was before I got sober. I got sober in my late 20s. So this would have been when I was still using and, doing drugs and alcohol, and I just thought, I don't know what I thought I'd find, and I just didn't want to see that person again. And now it's been quite nice. It's actually, I have quite a bit of compassion now for that younger self, which is interesting. And I also can see, trying to be a writer. Like I kept these notebooks and I was trying to be a writer, even though I didn't have, and there were a lot of quotes from other people I was reading. So it's really nice to see the quotes of Borges and Flannery O'Connor and Rilke, and just in the margins, just like writing all these quotes of people that were resonant quotes. It's wild. It's really wild.
That's great. I mean, I love the idea of keeping all of that stuff too. Like even if you don't even have a reason, you're not doing it consciously, right? But there's just something you can't throw away, these scraps of paper for some reason. And like you said, carrying it around for 40 years. I mean, that's what it is. But I always ask the next question, kind of what made you get into writing and reading, and how did you find it? And you said it was kind of like an escape from kind of your childhood, your life, or a fantasy, or
It's hard to say how I got into it, because when I was 12, I had a friend who I hung out with for one summer. We were in Boy Scouts together, and I convinced this friend that we should spend the summer writing. I was reading Sherlock Holmes then, and that we should spend the summer. The best way to spend the summer would be to try to write a story like Sherlock Holmes. And we wrote so we'd get together in the afternoons. We got 50 pages written of this thing set in the most exotic locales I could imagine, which were Scotland and Egypt. And it was just this thing. And it's a very strange thing to do, to okay, I get a good idea. I know a good way to spend the summer. We'll write something, and he was game. He went along with it. But then a few years later, I was probably 15 or 16, which is my daughter's age, which is interesting. I spent a summer with another friend, because I was reading Kurt Vonnegut then, and trying to write a science fiction story. So I always I thought it was always collaborative, that you wrote with someone else, and you sort of you bounced ideas off each other, and you did this thing. So it was always it was just a fun thing to do. And then at college, I always had a typewriter set up in my dorm room, and whenever you came in, you had to type something on the typewriter. You had to do something, and it was just there was always this collaborative element to it. And I just sort of wanted to be whatever I was reading. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe this is the kind of writer I am. Maybe this is the thing. And then I became a poet. I was at UMass, and I was in English. I was English major, undergraduate. I took a couple of years off after high school and just worked. I worked as an electrician. Quote unquote electrician. I mean, it was an electrician, but it was also working for gangsters. It was this sort of very shady organization I was working for. That my mother her boyfriend was, the main gangster, and it was just a whole very shady time. But then I ended up going to school and studying English. I sort of knew, and I could say, because we had no money, but I knew from doing that work that I could make money. I knew that I had a trade. I could be an electrician. I could make money. So school was a way for me just to not to just study what I wanted to study, which was literature and writing. So I took creative writing classes, and at some point, my last semester I was there, I dropped out. I dropped out of college, but what turned out to be my last semester was I heard there was a poet that was teaching there named James Tate, who was he was probably 40, I think he had won the Pulitzer when he was 25 or something. Like he was just like this, or he was Yale Series of Younger Poets. I mean, he was a very renowned poet. Like he was young, 40 years old, and had already had like several books. And I didn't know there were, I was studying English literature. I was studying like Beowulf and the Fairy Queen and things, and reading Faulkner. And I was like, oh, there's living poets. I didn't connect to that. I was 22 years old, and so I took this workshop with James Tate, and it kind of destroyed me. It kind of like we read a book a week, a contemporary book that came out that year, and I can still remember like all the titles that we read. Michael Burkhart's, Carolyn Forche, Lizelle Mueller. There's just this like beautiful Etheridge Knight. There's just this beautiful 14 books, read one a week, and just talked about them. Wrote like maybe a page or something about it, and just had a discussion. And it was just like I was like, oh, this is the thing. This is like the way my mind works. Like my mind works like these poems. I didn't understand all the poems. There was a whole range. I mean, the difference between like Michael Burkhart and Etheridge Knight is like, there's a world in between those two poets. But I was like, you could do anything. Greg Orr was a huge influence from that thing. I think The Red House, I think it might have been his first book or second book. Huge influence. And I was just like, oh, you can do this in this, like you could have like in like, Greg Orr has these like distilled moments that had so much power that just, talking and also talking about like really difficult things. Like this was, Greg Orr's, book talks about, one of his main stories of his life is that he accidentally shot his brother when he was young. Killed his brother. It's this thing that sort of haunts all his poems. And this is sort of that book sort of goes into that moment all his books touch on it. I mean, it's a thing that sort of runs, a thread that runs through all his work, I think, I would say. And that you could sort of like, touch something so deeply traumatic and, craft something that didn't sort of resolve it in any sense, but let it just sort of still be in the air as like this incomprehensible energy floating around. It was just so powerful to me. It was so powerful. Carolyn Forche going to, El Salvador and writing her, The Country Between Us, and just sort of like bringing politics. I was sort of political at that point too. I was becoming political. There was a whole, a lot of stuff going on in Central America with the death squads, U.S. funded death squads and things in the 80s. Sure glad that's behind us. We don't fund any death squads now. So that she could sort of bring the political in with this personal stuff. And there were sexy poems too. There were also very sort of, sexy poems and like, really amazing. Etheridge Knight writing from prison. It just seemed like, oh, this is like poetry can do anything. It could just do anything. Like I was so excited by it. And then I tried, and I couldn't write a fucking good poem for years. For years, I tried to write poems. I was like, I was sort of destroyed by trying to, listening to too many lyrics, rhyming, ballady couplets and just old English verse. That I had to like sort of break out of that, break out of that and sort of find my own voice. So, yeah, that was a big thing.
That's, I mean, all the questions that I always ask next is kind of like, the first writers that you start getting into and you were rallying them off. Vonnegut, I think, is always a huge one. We love Vonnegut on this podcast that you mentioned kind of, and I think that's a big one for writers that are starting, like they want to be that, like when you read these people, you're like, oh, I want to be that. But you said like kind of getting into the political too. Like I wanted to ask you about music and kind of your influences with that too. Kind of like, it's particularly the punk rock kind of influences, because I think that's also not a common story, but a story that I think a lot of writers share with this kind of their first introduction to kind of lyrical, putting words together and trying to make meaning out of them is like music. And punk, of course, is very interesting to me. I have some roots in that as well. But yeah, like how did music come into this in terms of getting you into poetry and writing? And
probably like the biggest influence lyrically back then was probably the Clash. The early Clash albums. Were like, I really sat up. I mean, I listened to a lot of music, but the Clash was like really important because they're also they were political and they were angry and they were, but they were also telling stories and there was little stories within each song. So I would say like that. And in my 20s, in this time, which is so weird. It's so weird to read these notebooks too, because I don't talk about the stuff I really did. Like I went to music every night. Like, I saw so many bands because you could go relatively cheaply, just go to a bar. I was gonna be in a bar anyway, so why not go to a bar that had music? I got to see great music like through my 20s, and there's almost not a word of like the bands I went to in these notebooks. Like it's if that wasn't part of like I hadn't figured out how to integrate my life. How to like sort of integrate the life into it. There's a moment. There's this crazy thing too. In the notebooks, I'll get back to the music in a second, but in the notebooks, my father becomes homeless in 1987. I have the notebook from 1987. I have the notebook from the time he became homeless. I don't fucking mention it like, in the notebooks. Like it's like, wait a minute, like I know this. Then there's like a little little glimmer of it. It's like, so it's my compassion comes from realizing like it's something I couldn't even touch it. Right. There's certain things I couldn't even write about. I couldn't even touch it. But I don't know why I couldn't write about music though. That was a fun part. Yes, getting to see this music. So yeah, I mean that's the thing. And I think it did musically. I guess you'd say like lyrics don't usually work as poems. Right. Like it's not like it's a whole different beast. Neil Young is like, one of the greatest songwriters, but if you just read his lyrics outright, like this is nothing, it's like there's not a whole lot here. Right. Yet somehow they're such amazingly beautiful songs, like it's magic. It's a magic thing, that combination. And, his lyrics are good, but he's not a lyricist like a Leonard Cohen, who's really as a poet also, he's right. Like, he's another beast. He's another beast. Like Lou Reed is like, I mean, Laurie Anderson says Lou Reed would just like write a song literally in like 30 seconds. You're just like write something out really quickly and then just sort of, that would be it. Whereas, other people, I think Hallelujah took him 7 years to write, like, right. So yeah, so it's a different thing. So, but music is, it's always sort of part of things. And like you said, I do work with musicians. I have like bands that I work with now that I've worked with for a while, for at least 10 years, maybe more. No, more. I've worked with a composer for Guy Barash for like 16 years, because I met him when my daughter was an infant, was 3 weeks old, like your L.
Yeah.
Yeah. I met him when she was tiny. I remember it was like he called and asked me to if he could use one of my poems, make a song out of one of my poems. And I was just so grateful to leave the house for like an hour to go get a coffee with a stranger. I was like, yeah, sure, let's do this.
Yeah, that's one of my questions too. Like, kind of when you started doing kind of your music project, I think I've heard in other interviews when I was researching this, kind of, you said around 2016ish or something was when you kind of started your band Killdeer, and you kind of started doing performances and making music. I imagine, you did music kind of like, did you play music when you were younger in your 20s and stuff, and then kind of, in 2016 you were kind of, you already the public figure of Nick Flynn, and then coming out kind of doing music too. What made you want to do that? And then even going off this, sorry, I know I have long questions here, but it's, what does that do for your creativity and writing practice, kind of having another creative outlet on top of writing? And
yeah, well, like I said, like I've always, like my first idea of what writing was as a collaborative project, which makes no sense to almost any other writer. But that's some reason that made sense to me. And so collaboration with other artists has just always been part of my practice. Like I've always I really find it fascinating to take a poem, a poem that I've worked on, and then put it through other mediums. Like what would happen if what would a sculptor do with this poem? What would a filmmaker do with this poem? What would how would a dancer interpret this? Like just to see,
right.
and it's not, it's so that becomes a thing in itself, that performance, whatever it is. But it also will reflect back on the poem, and I'll probably usually change the poem because I'll see something that I couldn't see before, when it's only words on a page. It's this very strange medium. I mean, writing is one of the stranger mediums that we work with. I mean, paint makes sense. Paint is made out of mountains and stones. I mean, it's not, it's you grind up minerals and make paints. Dance is the body. But what the fuck is writing? I mean, it's like it's breath. Is that writing? Like the noises that come out of your mouth? Is it the pictures you get in your brain when you look at like marks on a page? It's really weird. Like it's really fucking weird. So to put it in other mediums just releases other energies, other possibilities of it. So the band thing was just like a natural progression. Like, so it was before 2016. It was 2008. I began working with, because my daughter was born in 2008, and that's when I began working with Guy Barash. Like he came and asked if he could just make one of my poems into a song, and then he and I have done something on every book since. I've gone to him. He's like my composer. I think that each poet should have a composer. I think each poet should have a filmmaker. I mean, each filmmaker should also have a poet. Like it's just like, like it's So I have I have a photographer. He's like, I think he's my photographer. And then when they work with another poet, I get very jealous. I get very like wait a minute, you're my photographer. Like, but I have to work on that. So with Guy, we did a whole thing with my second memoir called The Ticking is the Bomb. And he and I did a whole series of, he said, well, what can we do? And, how can we work together on this book? And I said, well, there's a whole thread that goes through it of Proteus, the myth of Proteus. Maybe if we just extracted that, it's spread out over the whole book. But if we extracted that and sort of saw if we put them next to each other, and then we worked on that musically, and we have a whole series called Proteus. And then from doing that, it changed the writing. When I went back into the writing, it changed it because I was, working on it musically. And so it has the music in it. In the book now, in the version that's published in the book, it has the music in it, but you don't see it. You just sort of, it has made it a little wonkier in some way because it's inflecting this energy into it. And the last book, Low, I've performed that with the band, a lot with the band, but that was a slightly different process because that was during COVID, so the band thing wasn't really happening so much. But they were all based on these collages. That I have a collage practice also, where I've been making collages since I was in my 20s. I've been, it's like the art form that most speaks to me. Like I'll go see a Rauschenberg show, and I think Rauschenberg's amazing, but I really like his little collages, like just little sort of tossed off collages. Just to me have the most energy. These Dada, strange little moments put together. So I wrote a poem a day for a month, and then I did it for another month, a poem a day for a month, and that became the basis of based on these collages, and that became basically the basis of a book, Low. And then from that, I performed them with the band. I performed a lot of the poems with the band. That changed them also. That changed the texture of them. And then I also worked with an AI, a lab in Toronto, where. But we didn't really change it much of that because the book was already out. So the book was pretty much together. So that just sort of added a whole nother level of it, this other level of it. I had to figure out which ones would work with AI to make a film, to make this sort of film of a live film as I'm reading. So it's just always that, each book has all these other things that feed into it that make it the book. It's not just me sitting with a pen and writing the poem. Right. There's always like a handful of other people that are like influencing me, and sort of giving me like energy and ideas and possibilities. If you taking your poems and running them through, the AI doesn't change the poems. The AI just generates images. It's a voice activated image generator. So the poems are, I'm not into ChatGPT to write poems at this point. It doesn't. They seem kind of dumb to me.
Right.
But what it can do, like how it hallucinates on a screen when it's listening to you, is really fucking interesting. And so, yeah, so that's like one of the sort of latest collaborations I've done with that, with those things.
Yeah, there's, when I was right out of college, I worked at this cigar shop for a while, just, minimum wage type job. There was this kind of local poet who would come in. His name was Gary Blankenberg, and I had never heard of him before. He was never a huge name. He taught at one of the kind of local schools where I grew up there in Baltimore. But when he found out that I was into poetry, he would bring me things. He would bring me books, or he would bring me like a painting or something. And he always said that, like, a lot of writers, poets have to have another outlet other than just writing. And I've been thinking about this, it's kind of a theme on the podcast. We kind of constantly, orbit around the limits of language. Like, language can only do so much, and like you kind of need these other forms, like you said, dancing, painting, music, like these kind of other forms to inform the writing and all of that. And that's just obviously, we're not going to get any answers, and this isn't the type of podcast where we're looking for definitive answers, just your thoughts and all that on this kind of stuff. But yeah,
How did you get into poetry? When you were at the cigar shop, was that after you had done an undergraduate thing or a graduate thing? Or?
After I'd done an undergraduate, and I was applying to MFAs and getting rejected mostly. It took me 2 years to get in. And then, I got into it. I was probably around 19 in community college in Baltimore. Shout out CCBC. And it was like... music. It was music, which is why I always ask writers and stuff about that, especially somebody like you who's written about it and talked about your kind of music influences and stuff and current projects. It was always music. And for me, it was punk, but of course I'm 35, so I'm like younger, but Rancid, Green Day, these types of things that I discovered when I was in middle school. And then from that, getting turned on to, they loved the Clash. So then I got into the Clash. And then, these other kind of the early days of punk was really, really. And then, of course, in college, I got into indie rock. And Modest Mouse, which I wanted to talk to you about with Isaac Brock, touched me in a place where I'm still, to this day, will always go back to those albums and listen to them and stuff. And it kind of gave me that idea that you could manipulate these words around and you could get something out of it. They would make you feel something, or they'd make you free associate something, like just kind of the people say it's power, and maybe it is, the kind of power in it. But I that's basically what got me started. And then of course I got introduced to your work and all of that, which was, when you said you're getting introduced to contemporary, like, living poets, because you're taught in school all these dead poets, and then you get into living poets. And I had really good teachers when I was in undergrad there, particularly shout out Leslie Harrison. She was quite a mentor to me.
I know Leslie. Yeah, she's great.
And she introduced me to some of your stuff because she saw what I was doing or trying to do, and she was like, you should read Nick Flynn. And I was like, who's that? And picked it up. And again, as I said in the introduction, absolutely consumed by it, read everything. And then, it just kind of kept snowballing, from there, kind of getting into more and more contemporary stuff, And,
that's great. It's wild how it sort of takes. It doesn't take with everyone, but, I teach undergrads, not every year, but, I haven't I've taught grads the last several years, but I like teaching undergrads too, because that when they sort of see like the possibilities of poetry, it's really beautiful. And also I'm just sort of amazed when I'm teaching undergrads now, like in Houston, with this economy and with this like thing. I'm like, what do you think poetry is going to do for you? Like what, what is going on? Do you think this is going to be easy, or do you think that like, are you really interested in this? Is this like, what is the thing? And some people are, that there's still, this energy around poetry as like somehow a way to make meaning, and to sort of like that it's a form that does make meaning, is really beautiful. And I was also thinking of, when you were talking, like of the other streams feeding poetry. Billy Collins. They asked Billy Collins, what's the hardest thing about being a poet, and he's like, it's figuring out what to do with the other 23 hours a day. That like because I do think like writing poetry, like my creative energy for anything is about an hour. It's about the same as Billy Collins. It's like, I have about an hour of like good generative creative energy. If I can do it at the right time, it's really beautiful. I don't always get it. Sometimes I do it and terrible things come out, but that's like it. And then after that, it's just sort of like moving things around, moving furniture around, like sort of like, taking care of business, moving, doing things. But so, other people like painters don't have like, they're like in the studio like 12 hours a day because they have stuff to do. They have things to do that they have to sort of keep working on. It just gets worse if we do it. Like, we have to be in the world. We have to like go out in the world and like just be in that state of reverie and just allowing like the world to, to pour into us so that we then can come back out of it again. It's a very strange job. And I wouldn't say it's a lazy job because the other stuff is really important too. Like all the stuff that you do to get in shape for that 1 hour is really important. You have to sort of do everything. You can't just go fuck off for like, sit and like, eat Cheetos and watch porn for 23 hours. Like that's not going to create good poetry, in the end. Like that's going to, that'll have an effect on your creative output,
Yeah.
So, so you sort of have to figure out like things to do. That's why, we talked about, I don't know, that might have been before we even got onto the podcast here, but about, I just got out of a yoga, I do yoga. I have a yoga class, like I have to do something like that every day, one or two things like that every day, something physical, something spiritual, something, read, like connect to community, be good to another person. There's all things that one must do in order to become the person who can write that poem. That's the whole thing that I think Machado says that, right? Like I heard it from Stanley Kunitz first, like but I think he got it from Machado. If you read a poem you love and you want to figure out how to do it, you have to figure out how to become the person who can write that poem. Which is, it sounds very simple, but it's like it's it's changing your entire life. It's like to become that person. Yeah,
it's this. I think a lot of people that don't do creative things, they don't understand how much stamina kind of it does take to create something out of nothing. And let's don't want to talk. Oh, this is the special thing we do, but it's just kind of it is.
Poets are the hardest working people in the world. Now, I said that as a joke once to like a group of people. I was like, I'm fucking kidding. Like, but it is hard though. But it is hard.
Yeah. And you have to do these things. Like you have to, mind and body, right? Yeah, you spiritual and body. It's kind of, you keep it connected, keep that in shape so you can keep the kind of poetry, creative muscle in shape. Because at the end of a session, I mean, you do feel drained. And I mean, I'm always impressed by writers that can do 3-4 hour sessions or all day sessions. It's more fiction writers that do that kind of thing, of course. But it's just like, you write long form in terms of memoir and stuff. But I was going to ask you about that in terms of the process here. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but still, I want to ask you about memoirs. One of your craft forms of choice. One, why memoir, and two, how did you get into these kind of ideas of writing memoirs? Like, how did that happen? Did you just fall into it? Was it just by accident? How did you fall on that? Because most people that are writing books are like, oh, you wrote a poetry book, and then they're like, oh, I'll write fiction now, or I'll do something like that. But you've taken the memoir route. How is that?
Yeah. I think I would agree. I think Maggie Nelson said in an interview once that she just doesn't understand. I think she said she doesn't understand the fictive impulse, like that, like, and I kind of, I read that resonated with me, just that it's I don't completely understand, and I have much less tolerance for fiction also. Like I read beautiful, there's books of fiction that I just absolutely love. But I can walk away from a book of fiction very easily if I'm sort of like, yeah, I get what they're doing. I get this is making all this up, and it's not really doing it for me. Whereas nonfiction, I'll be a little more. I don't want to say that I'm more generous because it also has to be well written. It has to be like beautifully written. But you are sort of getting something from the world. Like the idea of someone in a memoir, like in a good memoir. I mean, a bad memoir is like really a terrible thing. It's like, it's like, it's one of the worst things you could do. It's like, going to read a bad memoir. But when it's done well, and the author is really like sort of like balancing that on that line between the internal self, like the way that they're perceiving the world, and then the actual coming up against the reality of the world, and like that tension that gets created, like we want the world to be a certain way, or we remember the world a certain way, or we were led to believe the world was a certain way, but then this is the way it seems to be at this moment. It just seems to be a really like a vibrant energy to that I haven't come to the end of yet. I keep thinking I'm gonna maybe try. I mean, I did a play. I wrote a play, which is definitely more. It's creating characters and stuff, and that was kind of interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it's not outside the realm of what I might do, but I just haven't come to the end of being fascinated with the actual stuff of the world. So now, like, I'm back in, like, I'm writing about living on a boat in my 20s, like, and it's just something that I haven't like really, I touched on it in the first memoir. I just sort of touch on it. But it's sort of it was a big thing. It was sort of a very big thing. And it's a strange thing too. Like I'm reading these notebooks now too, these notebooks from my 20s. And I lived on boats from the time I was like 19 until I was like 31, like for a long time. Like for long periods of time, I was just on a boat, and I ended up working on boats, ended up like getting a captain's license, and it was a big part of my life, and it's a strange thing. It's a very strange thing to do, a strange choice to make, and I'm trying to understand it too. I'm trying to understand that choice. And again, I don't talk about it a lot in the notebooks. It's just it's like a fish, swimming, doesn't talk about the water it's swimming in, because it's just that's just your daily reality, so somehow I'm like I want more. I wanted to have like stuff of the boat all the time on each page. I thought that'd be like filled with like nautical terms, and like I had to go dive on my anchors today, and none of it, just like that was just sort of like what I did every day. And then and writing was something else. Writing was sort of getting at something else, which I didn't figure that out about integrating my life. I really didn't get that, like that you can do whatever you're looking at right now in front of you is the most valuable thing. There's some reason to figure out why you are sitting here looking at that thing right now is what's interesting, and not whatever you think it should be, whatever you imagine it should be. So,
or just kind of like what resonates and what sticks, especially you mentioned being younger, you're not even paying attention to the what the hell is water, right? The DFW line kind of, like the kind of what everything around you is just there, and you're like, oh, I'm trying to be this, so you're not even paying attention to the things that. Is there a different process? Like, is there a different process between poetry, memoir, and even playwriting and stuff, or is it just kind of the same? Don't think about it too hard, or we're kind of a writing literature podcast, and listeners like to know these kind of details about. Do you do anything differently when you're writing a memoir versus writing a book of poems, or?
Well, the memoirs all are. They're contained in somehow in like, time and place. They have like a certain energy around that. Like it's usually, it's not like the whole, it's not everything in the world. It's sort of contained in time and place. You're trying to sort of contain that energy, and by just going deeper into that moment, like sort of like drilling down into those moments. What you do with poetry too, but with poetry, it can, the shape of a book of poetry is often revealed, much later. Like, there's a couple books I've done that you could call project books. The Blind Huber would probably be considered now a project book. It was also before we talked about project books. The Captain Asks for a Show of Hands would probably be a project book. And so I sort of did have a sense of like, this is like, it almost felt more memoir-like in that sense, because you were sort of in a thing where other books are like collections of poems that somehow are just sort of like tracking like the 5 years in that it took to write those, and was sort of like what's happening around that moment or something. Rather than going back into some era. I write them the same. I really write them the same, I think, except the nonfiction, you do have to stay with it a lot longer. You have to sort of like figure out a way to keep it alive in you. Whereas with a poem, you can write a poem and then walk away from it and then go live your life. That's why I prefer writing poems, because then you get to like actually be alive, more alive. Whereas when you're writing nonfiction, you sort of get like, you kind of split, you know, you're a little bit split, like you're not fully alive.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
Because right now I'm like, I'm spending a lot of time encountering my 20-year-old self, and like, but I have a 16-year-old daughter. Like, what the fuck? Why am I don't need to encounter a 20-year-old self, like.
Yeah, and there's like threads, right? Whereas like long form writing, you have to follow that thread, and you can't just snip it after you're done doing a draft, and then go on and come back to it later. I mean, you could, but then you lose that thread, and it's not quite the same. And so I'm always just curious about like how that works out.
Yeah. I mean, I find just ways to like, I haven't gotten into, people talk about all these different like tools that they work with, Scrivener and stuff like that, mind clouds. Mind maps and things like that, which I think are great. My wife does that. My wife is just finishing a book, which is her first book. And I'm really grateful for many reasons. It's a really beautiful book, but also because now she knows how fucking hard it is to write a book. And so, so now she sort of has some more compassion for me when I'm, caught in this, this thing. So hopefully she'll be able to remember that. Yeah, what were we saying? Something about.
I think it was a great answer. Yeah, but I mean, this podcast, and we just kind of go all over the place with this. Yeah, don't worry about it. But going off memoir, the kind of like, I like to ask this about writers that do memoirs or nonfiction stuff. Like, does a writer have? And again, this is an endless debate. We're not looking for definitive answers. Just your thoughts. Like, kind of this. Does a writer have any responsibility when writing something like a memoir? And I mean that in terms of like, when you're writing either, and we could extend this to poetry too, kind of writing confessional poetry or a memoir. Do we have any responsibility to the people we're writing about? Like the actual people that populate work like that, how someone is portrayed or how they come off? Or is that anything you struggle with? Is it something that if you think about too much, it's just like, you can't do it? Or how do you feel about that?
Well, one thing is that there's always going to be other people in, no matter what we do. There's going to be, most clearly in memoir, nonfiction, fiction, I guess not so much, but most books of fiction of people I know, when I read them, I can recognize people that they've sort of transposed into them. My friends that have I've appeared in various guises in 1 or 2 other books. So and I think it's a huge responsibility. I think it's a huge responsibility. I think it's part of the whole job of being a writer, especially if you're writing memoir with other people in it. That responsibility to them, and my main way of thinking about it is to write from a place of compassion for them, and not to write to like get even with somebody, or to to prove you were right, or to like somehow like you have the last word or something. I mean, it's a very it is a powerful thing to be the one writing the story, and I think you owe it to them, to the people that in it, to like really almost try to write it from an egoless place, where it's not about you. It's really to understand like why they're fitting into this piece. I mean, I'm writing right now. But, you know, I hate to say this, but you're probably not going to end up in my book, even though we're having a nice conversation now. You know, so
I didn't expect to be. Yeah, but hey, if you want to, maybe the next one I'll be in there.
Having a very nice conversation, but I don't think it's like really part of the book about me living on a boat in my 20s. But those that do end up in the books, you do have a responsibility to. And so, I mean, part of the reason I'm writing this book now is actually because the book's about living on a boat, you know, through my 20s. And I, you know, about midway through that journey, I became friends with someone in Provincetown named Richard. And Richard and I became very tight. We were really, really good friends. We ended up living together in Boston, and you know, it was a really important friendship for me. And he died of AIDS. You know, he died of AIDS about probably 7 years after I met him. And he was diagnosed within a year or two of me meeting him. There was a lot of hospital stuff. It was very early age. He died in 1992, which was the height of people dying. Most people died that year from AIDS, at least in America. I'm not sure around worldwide, but in America at least. And it was right. And then after that, like, you know, the cocktails sort of started coming in and people started like surviving. You know, still a lot of people died, but the height of it was 92. And he appears in the first memoir in Another Bullshit Night in Suck City, but he feels very briefly. Like he's just sort of like, and I sort of say that, like, I say that he was tested positive, and then I say he died. Like he's just sort of like, he's not like a main character in the book, but he appeared in it. And then so he ends up appearing in the film also. He appears in the film. And when you know, all they did was they just sort of said, like, I guess in the script or something, they said his whole character just said he was gay. And so the actor that played him, who I see now on TV, like selling telephones or something, he kind of annoys me because all he did was he did this really stereotyped gay performance, like really like sort of swishy, which is really fine. If that's who you are, that's completely fine. But that wasn't who Richard was. Like Richard was not like that at all. Richard would have been horrified by this portrayal of him. And you know, I didn't feel good about it, but you know, there was a lot going on with getting the film together. You know, I couldn't fight that battle. I was just like, okay, that sucks, but you know, what do you do? But then his sister, you know, called me like after the film came out, and she was just like, or emailed me, and she's like, why'd you do that to Richard? Why'd you do that? And I was like, I know, it's terrible. But I didn't have control over that. I'm really sorry. And that was like, you know, 10 years ago. And then like about 10 years later, it just rose up, and Richard started coming out in the writing. And it is the book is really like fleshing out that friendship in some way, and that thing. It's almost to like, because he appeared, but that's the thing, like, did he need to even appear in that book? Maybe he didn't. You know, it's a thing, like, what, you know, but it did seem necessary because we were living together, and there were moments where it was necessary. What he said was really important, you know? So he sort of appeared at this moment because he's the one who, we're living together when my father appeared at the homeless shelter. And so, you know, I got to talk to him about it. And so that's why he's sort of in the book. But so now it's sort of fleshing that out. It's fleshing out that relationship. So I think it's a great responsibility. I think you really do need to do it, and to, you know, the best way I found is to do it, to write from a place of compassion, to try to understand them, even if it's like the person that done you wrong, like to figure out, like I was just sort of, I taught a writing group last week. I taught a writing workshop, and one of the guys in the workshop was talking about a difficult thing with his father. And what he had written, I mean, he's written other things about his father, probably not as bad, but this was pretty bad. It just felt like, you know, he wasn't being portrayed. He was being portrayed accurately, but it was very harsh.
Right. And
I sort of said, like, well, there's that, you know, Vivian Gornick thing, and I said it even maybe before Vivian Gornick, I don't know, but like it's just like, you know, you want to make the villain into a saint in some way, like, because it just sort of it makes things hard. It makes you have to work harder to like understand like where they're coming from and why they would do those things. And so I said that to him. I said, you know, and I said, like, in the group, I said, like, I'm sure that your father was like a good person. I know that he was, like, at some point in his life, he was a good person. And he was like, and the guy was like, well, why? How could you know that? I'm like, well, because you're sitting here and you're a good person. and I can see his light coming through you. Like that's the only way that you would actually have that light within you is if you got it from him, because that's the way the world works. You know, like you are half your mother and half your father. And, you know, sometimes you get all the bad stuff. Sometimes you get all the good stuff. Sometimes you get usually get a little bit of both, you know? And so, you know, I could see that his light, and it was quite moving for him to, I think, to see that, to sort of like, to recognize that and to, you know, pull out what is the moment when, you know, what is his, who was his father as a child, you know, what was his childhood like, and sort of have that sort of expand the whole thing. So there's this kind of like philosophical thing that I always like, it fascinates me to think about, where this guy says, you know, think of yourself like, are you a better or worse person than each of your 4 grandparents? You know, kind of think back to that and think like, do you think that you're a better or worse person than them? You know, like, because ideally you would hope to be a better as you kind of, you know, the family kind of expands and stuff. But, you know, it's not such an easy question. Yeah. And I think wrestling with that, really, that's the art of, like you said, I mean, the memoir or something like that. But I wanted to ask you, like, is there, like, when you finish a memoir, is there like a cathartic feeling? Is there a fear, like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Like what, when you finish that and you're kind of like, oh, I did all right, you know, what do you get out of it in terms of writing that kind of memoir style? Well, it's not for catharsis. I think there is some kind of, there is some sort of catharsis, but I think catharsis, to go back to like the original, you know, idea of it, is more of a daily practice. That's what the Greeks intended. It wasn't something that you know, experience. It wasn't like a sort of an Oprah thing where you had a moment, you had a revelation, and then suddenly you were free of that terrible thing that happened to you. You know, like generally it's more of a day, you wake up the same person, you have to figure out the ways to get through it. It's a daily practice. And which I think is just really helpful too, to think of it's like, you know, we're always going to have the same stuff. The dial's going to be turned down a bit. You're not going to feel it as intensely, whatever that pain is. Writing might help you with that, might help you sort of organize that thing. But it's also like, you know, the danger is like you're creating a story that's, you know, if you write it in a certain way, it creates a story that sort of like locks in place. Maybe it's a false story. Maybe it doesn't contain the fullness of the world, because that's all you can do at that moment. You know, that's all we can do. We're always going to tell a partial story, because that's all we're able to do. We're never, you know, we haven't quite reached the level of God or anything that we can, you know, tell the whole story. You know, that's why, you know, the omniscient narrators are so terrifying to me in fiction. You know, they have that believe they have that power. So the catharsis, like, but I have felt like things sort of, like the last memoir, like I wrote, This Is the Night Our House Will Catch Fire. Like in every, you know, the story is that my mother set our house on fire when I was 6 years old, to collect the insurance money. My brother and I were asleep inside the house. You know, seems like a dangerous thing, but up until, you know, and I've written about that in every book. Like there's a house fire in every book I've written. Like there's just like a house catches fire. Like it's just sort of a recurring metaphor, an actuality. You know, it's just sort of it's this thing that kept going. But when I first wrote about it, when I wrote about it in Bullshit Night, and I wrote about it in Some Ether. It's in Some Ether. You know, the hives catch fire in Blind Huber. I mean, it's just like, you know, this is, you know, it's a thing. It's a thing deep in my psyche. But when I first wrote about it, like I kind of was at the position where and I found out writing Bullshit Night that my mother had set the house on fire. Before that, it had been a story that raccoons had set the house on fire. But then in writing the book, I interviewed her boyfriend she was with at the time, and he told me that she had set the house on fire, which is very more believable than the raccoons, actually. But when he told me that, I was in my mid-30s. I was probably about your age, which I think is the age where you can start to sort of like look back at your parents and realize that they're not going to destroy you or something.
Right.
You know, you have to, you know, somehow our development, we have to wait till we get to be our mid-30s or something to do that. But I looked at her and I just looked at it with compassion and sort of with humor. Like I think, oh yeah, that was a cool thing for her to do, because our house was a shithole and we did need the money, and she got the money.
Right.
And the house became a little better. Like we were living in, she was a young single woman. She was 25 years old. She had 2 kids. She was broke. Yeah, it's not I've come up with worse ideas, and so that went for a long time, 35, I had my kid when I was like 48. And when my kid turned, so I was in my mid 50s, my kid turned 7, and suddenly I'm like, what the fuck? You set a house on fire with a kid in it? like suddenly it hit me like, oh, that's psychotic. But it took me that long to figure that out. It took me a long time to figure that out. And so the first story I had of it is like kind of like, I don't know who, what people thought when they read the book or something, but like, I know some people wrote like, like Mark Doty wrote on the cover of like some ether, he wrote like, this is one of the most terrifying families in American letters. I'm like, what the fuck? Like the Manson family? Like they're pretty terrifying. Like
the Wuthering Heights. I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah. I'm like, I thought it was a little over the top, but then like I think he was seeing something that I wasn't quite ready to see. Like he was really taking what I was writing about and not like just filtering it through like whatever defenses I needed to have. So writing that book and going through that, what I had to do to write that book, This Is Not a House Will Catch Fire. It was a lot of therapy, a lot of like, a lot of stuff happened to write that book. And so it's the stuff you have to do to write the book that's cathartic. The writing the book can fucking kill you. I mean, it's like, it's not like if you go for like, if you go to like think, oh, I want to heal myself by writing a book, I think it's the wrong. I would not suggest that. I would suggest you go to therapy, And if you're lucky, you'll be able to write the book once you sort of get your shit together a little bit, Yeah.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of sobriety as well. I just had an interview with this guy who just wrote a great memoir, Jared Klickstein, and he was addicted for about a decade, like homeless, living on the streets in Skid Row and stuff.
Wow.
And he wrote this great memoir about it that just came out. But I just...
What's it called? What's his book called?
Crooked Smile. Crooked Smile is the name of it. Yeah, go back and listen to that, listeners. It's there. But I just wanted to ask, what motivated that? How did you... Because he was talking about kind of like, it's almost a spiritual thing to get over kind of addiction or to go into like a sobriety with your life and stuff like that. And it just kind of, what motivated that? Was there an event? Was there something that happened? Was there just kind of, you were just sick of it? I mean, how did you, because I mean, and I think people underestimate how difficult that is too, but just kind of, how did you get there, to where you are today, many, many years sober and all of that?
Well, I can just go back to like, I'm reading my notebooks now of when I was using, and it's really fascinating because I was just like, I was clearly moving toward like trying to figure out my relationship to drugs and alcohol. I mean, that was the clear thing. Like that was like really clear because I'm like, I ended up taking like, studying because like I said, I dropped out of university, out of UMass during that semester with James Tate because my mother died. I sort of stopped functioning for a while. And then over the years, I started working at the homeless shelter, and then I began like at a certain point, I sort of started to get my bearings again, and I started studying. Like I went to UMass Boston to study to be a social worker. I took this thing called social seminar in social services or something. It was like you got like 6 credits. You got credits for working in a social service agency and then credits for taking the class. So you could get like a bunch of credits at once, and that's like I needed credits to graduate. So and it was really fascinating, but a lot of it was around drugs and alcohol. And I was working with like hardcore addicts and hardcore, I was taking people to detox, and I was studying about addiction, and I was like really like writing like all this stuff about like the, exactly like all stuff around like the consequences of addiction, the treatment for addiction, the physiological effects in your body from addiction. Like I was just like, and this is like 2 years before like I got sober, and I wasn't really thinking like I need to do this myself. I was just like, but the whole book is like, so the whole notebook, this one notebook of this time is like really sort of heartbreaking and beautiful, because you can see that my mind is working toward that. Like my psyche is working toward it. I'm working it out in writing. I'm there's no reason I didn't have to go work at a shelter. I didn't have to go put myself with like hardcore addicts that are like the consequences are right in front of you every fucking day. People are dying. like from their addiction every day. And yet, but I didn't want to quit using drugs or alcohol. I had no desire to. There was no desire whatsoever. Like I was like, no, I want to figure out how to use drugs and alcohol until the day I die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die when I'm 30, but I don't, I want to live a long fucked up life, like mildly fucked up. Like I didn't think it was like that fucked up. It seemed like mildly. Just I wanted to be a little fucked up all the time, and then like but you could see that I was wrestling. There was some part of me that was wrestling with that, like in these notebooks. It's quite poignant for me to read that and be like, oh, like I was like on that path. It wasn't like suddenly one thing happened, like, okay, you got to do this. Like when it was suggested to me quite strongly, I had I had a girlfriend for like 10 years. It was sort of, nowadays you'd call it polyamorous, I guess, but we were just like, fucking around on each other. Right. Really, like it was messy. It was messy at times. Sometimes it was really beautiful. She was really great. I saw her last week. She's a great person. One of the loves of my life. But it was like hard. Like to be with me in my 20s was not a fun thing. And so, I wouldn't want to be. I didn't want to be with me in my 20s. I ended up like fucking around, and she found out, and she said like unless you go to therapy, we gotta end this. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to therapy, but I really just wanted to go to therapy because the writing wasn't happening. Like I couldn't. I was like, I think I can write, but I just can't I can't. My mind is so confused. So I went to therapy, and the therapist said, asked me how many drugs and alcohol I did, my history, my intake history, and I told him. I never lied about it. It didn't seem like because I was hanging around with like hardcore junkies, and it didn't seem that bad what I was doing. Like like Richard was a junkie, like Ivan was a junkie. These people were my closest friends were like hardcore heroin users, and I was not. So I was like the responsible person, and so I told the therapist this, and he was just like, oh, you're an alcoholic and a drug addict. And I was like, yeah, well, I know that, but that's not why I'm here. Like that's something else. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something else. He goes, well, I'm not going to waste my time with you unless you attempt to get sober. Like, get sober, go to meetings, get sober, and then then see how that goes. And I didn't think it would be that hard. And it was really fucking hard. Yeah. It was like it was not easy. It was like, and mostly what was hard was, the physical stuff wasn't hard, but like it wasn't like I went through DTs or anything like that or withdrawal, except psychically. But the hard thing was that suddenly there was a flood of emotion that came because drugs and alcohol just numb limit the emotional range that you can feel. That's the purpose of it, is to sort of have not to be overwhelmed by the emotional energy, and it works really well for a while until suddenly you're sort of flatlining through life, and so I did it. I just started to have this rush of emotions, this range of emotional things, and a lot of them were hard, a lot of them were ecstatic. It was just it was wild. It was a wild run for the first year or two of sobriety, and that's what sort of kept me going, because it was really a rush too. It's this is I feel like I'm in the fucking circus. I'm in a carnival. I'm in an emotional carnival. So it was whoa, this is wild, but it was good, and I really liked. I liked the community. I like the fellowship, as they say, of meetings. I didn't like the book too much. I didn't like a lot of the stuff they said. I thought they were really corny. But now I'm fully in it. I've been doing meetings for a long time, and I think it's kind of a profound spiritual program that's kind of amazing. Yeah. So I went to a meeting yesterday. So
yeah. And I mean that kind of, I guess, yeah. The thing is, like you said, the book, that's kind of all those kind of NAAA stuff is tied up in kind of religious stuff, right? I mean,
it's not religious. It's not religious. No, it's spiritual. Yeah.
Spiritual.
Yeah. It's not connected to any religion. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, going off of kind of the spirituality kind of aspect to this, and since we're on the topic, meditation. in researching this, you've spoken about the practice in many interviews and stuff before, and I'm a fan of public figures like Sam Harris and stuff who preach the practice often. But I wanted to ask, what does meditation do for you? How do you use it? When did you start, and why?
You had to bring up Sam Harris.
Are you not a fan? Are you
You can look at The Ticking is the Bomb. I sort of talk about Sam a lot in that. He's an advocate of torturing Muslims.
Oh, right. That was during his end of faith era, right? Yes.
He's still on that train. I mean, he's come back again with a vengeance with the whole Israeli, Hamas thing. He's got the solution. Just gonna torture these Muslims a little more. So yeah, he's a fucking problem. Yeah. Hugely influential. It's terrifying. It's terrifying how fucking influential he is. So yeah, the meditation thing, it's, I've just been doing it for a long time. I've been doing it, and I do it with all my writing workshops. We all meditate during the writing workshop. I meditate before I write. I find it's like the best way to get to to get to that subconscious stuff where all the good stuff is sort of hiding. And I've done meditation retreats, like 7-day, 5-day silent retreats, which I find really, actually, they're hard, and then they get really sort of ecstatic by the end. So it's not like I'm not fully connected to a Zendo right now in my life, but I like I say, when I teach writing workshops, meditation is always a part of it. I'll be teaching one next week, so we'll be meditating, quite a bit during the week. I find I think it's as important as the writing in some ways. It just feels like it's like it doesn't matter what comes out in the writing. If you have a daily practice of this and just trusting it, then the writing is gonna sort of you're gonna find that we want to read people's work that's sort of in a glimpse into the interior life, and this is like a way to this is like a portal right into it. Through meditation, you sort of get into this stuff that's not like the surfacey stuff that you think you should be writing, but this sort of strange, terrifying, ecstatic things that are hiding within us. So.
Yeah, and you've said that before, that it kind of helps you get into the kind of for lack of a better term, the subconscious, right? This kind of the ether that everything's kind of swimming around in, and kind of, is it like the relaxation? Is it just kind of like the no judgment, like being able to not judge yourself while you make mistakes in the writing process and stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an alpha state or something. It's a whole other state. We try to write quicker than we can think. That was the thing. I ended up studying with Carolyn Forche after I had read her book. When I first got sober, I was able to go study with her, and I studied with her for 3 summers in a row. And that was the thing of her. She didn't do meditation, but it was to write fast as you could think. And now mine is sort of more it's a little more focused. It's from meditation, we sort of set up our page. It's really writing into these moments in our writing that we want to go deeper into. So we sort of get it all set up ahead of time. So it's not just sort of I'm going to surprise myself. It's okay, this is where we're going. We're going down this field, So it's a little more focused in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, we always ask this kind of question too a little later, but is that become kind of a vital part of your writing process and routine to do that? Because you said, as you teach it in the workshops and all of that,
Well, I do most of my generative writing, getting the really valuable stuff that then I end up working with. I get it out of those writing workshops. I do writing in the writing workshops. I also write with the writers I'm working with, and I've done I did 2 workshops in August. I just did one in September. I'm going to do one in October. So it generates a lot of work. And now I'm taking that work and seeing how it fits in, how I can fit it into the larger thing I'm working on right now. So there's these. So that's my process right now at the moment. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And moving on again, maybe this is spiritual too. Kind of, I want to talk to you about the avant-garde side of kind of literature and art. And I've talked about this idea publicly a little bit, where I've said that kind of I'm not sure that we even know what avant-garde art looks like, kind of in the 21st century, in kind of film or poetry, fiction, even music. And I just kind of, I often see people pointing to the avant-garde of the 60s, 70s, maybe even the 90s, kind of this, but I always but that's like mainstream now, kind of accepted, like it did its job of pushing the boundary and now we've kind of moved, But I just wanted to ask your question, what is the avant-garde in the 21st century, or your thoughts on that? Like where is it? What would it look like? Or any ideas like that? And again, we don't need definitive answers. This is just your thoughts, your ideas, Nick Flynn's.
Sure. Like in the the 60s and stuff. I mean, I think the avant-garde where I go to is like sort of Fluxus stuff, and I don't think that's been incorporated at all, like into our daily practices, or into the mainstream at all. Like for one example of Fluxus work, Yoko Ono's like sound pieces, or
yeah.
I mean, I don't think they've been. I think it's still out there work, and it still does point to like places where people can go. We get little glimpses of it, and the avant-garde's always going to do that. It's always going to show us like sort of moments, like it's going to open a door that we hadn't imagined before. It's really important to have an avant-garde, just to have not in the mainstream, to have this thing. And it doesn't, I guess you could say it gets incorporated, but I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of like incorporation of really good avant-garde work into mainstream art these days. Maybe you have. I'm trying to think of, what do you mean? How do you see it incorporated like into work right now?
Well, I'm thinking mainly in terms of the experimental music and art that was happening at that time. I'm thinking like the Captain Beefheart era in terms of music and stuff, and then kind of, again, maybe mainstream's the wrong word for that then, because I guess it'll never quite be mainstream, but it has influenced, it kind of done its job, you know what I mean? Like kind of like done its job to push a little boundaries, and then the mainstream kind of goes a little bit further toward that direction. And I'm just curious about, nowadays, like I don't know, I guess I'm looking for it maybe, and I think you see it in your work and stuff, but yeah, I don't know, I'm just tossing the idea around. I'm trying to
think like in musically, like I just went to a listening party up in Red Hook, New York, in Tivoli, New York, with a guy, Joe Hagan, who he wrote the book Sticky Fingers, which is a biography of Rolling Stone magazine. He's a friend, and he has these friends that get together, and they just try to bring these really out there records and play them, and try to figure out like, okay, what is this? Like try to they don't tell them what it is. Like, okay, what do you think this is? And it is like trying to find like the strangest sort of like music from like, and it's a very particular thing, because also they're on vinyl, and so you can always guess it's like it's going to be from the 60s. It's going to end like in like 1979 or something. When vinyl sort of stopped happening, or or maybe the 80s, mid 80s at the latest. Like by the 80s we're buying vinyl that much anymore. And so you sort of figure out the era of it and stuff, and they do try to they play stuff. It's like some mainstream people that we're pushing even their stuff into like other realms. Like just sort of like wanting to play like into this sort of more experimental sounds, but those are the songs we don't know. I mean, these are the songs we don't remember, but It maybe helped them as artists. It helped them as artists to sort of like get something else in there, and then you get to hear moments of like an album like Pet Sounds, which is like maybe completely experimental, really, like in some ways, but yet it's completely pop too. It's a very strange, wild mix. To have like a genius like that's able to sort of have those two things happening at once, and that stuff survives too. Like that's like that's one of the greatest albums ever made. And it's a completely unique and personal and unclassifiable, and and you'd say, that's bringing like the avant-garde into this moment. And then and here I guess you do hear like you brought up Modest Mouse and stuff like that. I mean, there is like sort of like we recognize that sort of when people are pushing into some other realm that feels new. I mean, you do want to have this new thing. Even Chapel Roan now maybe has some moments of just touching on it. And I haven't listened to all of their work, of Chapel Roan's work, and so maybe it's like stuff that's like even more like experimental, within it, that's like sort of pushing it. It's I wouldn't be surprised at all if it is. And then in writing, I mean, you get a lot of this. There's all sorts of right now in poetry. It's like wildly. I mean, it's almost. I mean, there's the whole tendency toward like the project book now is like a thing that's sort of really like and taking on like a political historical moments, almost like documentary poetics as a project, as like a period of time. So there's a lot of stuff in it. I'm not sure where to classify that. It doesn't feel really avant-garde to me. But sometimes it does. Like I think even the early versions of that, like I think like Solmaz Sharif's like look felt very sort of like fresh and new, and even Whereas by Layli Long Soldier felt like like it was doing those things, like right on the edge of the avant-garde and documentary poetics and having these things. And sometimes like now it's sort of shifted so much into that right now that I'm not totally sure. Like I'm not completely convinced by some of the things that are happening right now with that movement. Like maybe it's gone down a dead end or something in some ways.
Which, I mean, maybe that's inevitable, when you're trying to push boundaries to hit those dead ends and stuff. Yeah. Did you by chance, I'm a big movie guy, did you see Ari Aster's Beau is Afraid?
Beau is Afraid? No.
That was one that when I saw that, it felt like avant-garde to me. Like, oh, this is... and again, it's still kind of mainstream because it's Ari Aster stuff, but it's still kind of like... It felt like he was really pushing limits, like the limits of what like a movie would look like and feel like in the plot of a movie, and how you could really kind of string it together in these very abstract ways. That was something that I was thinking. I was like, is that the avant-garde right now? And of course, we don't know, but that was just interesting.
That sounds great.
Very interesting stuff.
I mean, I'm connected to a group down in Houston called Nameless Sound, which they're very like experimental music group, and it's exciting to go see. I try to bring my students to see them once a year. Like they have a weekly event. It's just always sort of like blows their minds because it's just this music like they've never heard before, never seen before. They're just like, what is this? And I really like to do that to like get them to see the possibilities. And so there's still hope, and they're sort of connected to. They come out of like Pauline Oliveros, deep listening practice. She was, the very influential avant-garde musician who just died a couple of years ago. I'm working with a guy in a couple of weeks, David Rothenberg, who's a musician who came up, and we have a pond on our land, and he does these pond concerts, and he takes a hydrophone, which is a microphone that you can put underwater, and he amplifies the sounds of underneath the pond, and it's like these crazy sounds, and then he plays along with them, and so he does a lot with nature, and he does a lot with like sort of collaborating with nature, and that's his sort of his medium, and he finds ways to amplify the sounds of nature and to do it. He's really fascinating. I hadn't met him before. We just came and did this thing, and now we're going to work again in like 10 days or something. We're going to do our first thing together. That was just him, me watching him. I'm like, hey, let's do something together. So we're going to do something where there'll be like nature, David Rothenberg, and me doing poems. Right. So I have no idea how it's going to go. But it's like, we got a venue, we got a date, it'll happen. We got an audience. So.
Do you want to plug it? Or I guess if it's going to happen in a few days, this might not be out yet, but.
Well, it's going to happen at Omega on October 10th. Omega, which is in Rhinebeck, New York, on October 10th in the evenings, probably 7 o'clock at night or something.
That's going to be awesome. Yeah. Did you by chance? This is just by Isaac Brock from Modest Mouse, his side project, Ugly Casanova. Did you ever listen to that? No.
No. I'm very bad. I'm a very bad fan. Like I actually don't want to know who makes the music.
Right.
Like I have no idea who Isaac Brock is, although I love Modest Mouse.
Right.
Like I've never heard that name. I've never heard that name before ever.
Yeah.
So like they often disappoint me. They don't always, but often like if I go and actually hear them, I'm like, oh, that's what you think the song's about? Oh, fuck.
Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think that sometimes they can be brilliant, but sometimes not. So I find it best to live in my own interpretation of the song, and not read too much about them, not know too much about them. So
I mean, I think that's the authority, especially when it comes to any type of art, music, art, like your interpretation of whatever you're hearing, reading, seeing, like that is what matters, what the artist said kind of, and people have criticism of the death of the author. I'm a fan of the death of the author in terms of that stuff. Like it's up to us. Like, yeah.
Then why are we doing this podcast?
Right. Well, you notice I didn't ask you so much about what each one means. Yeah, about what does this poem mean? What does my favorite poem mean? And then, kind of meeting your heroes type thing where you're disappointed, right?
Yeah, but hopefully I've disappointed some people. I mean, hopefully.
Absolutely. But I wanted to ask you this too, that this is another kind of more philosophical question. Why do you think artists want to push boundaries? What is it about pushing the limits that attracts kind of writers and artists? And again, this is just your thoughts, no definitive answers, but what do you think about that? Like,
well, I mean, when you read, you sort of like every era has it falls into like a style or something that we recognize, and then you start to not take it in too deep. Like, oh yeah, I've heard this before, with music or something like, hey, this is just sort of like that. This is like that. And yeah, you want to sort of like find something that hasn't been done before, because it does open up new possibilities of consciousness to do that. And I think we need to sort of stay in we're in our own era for a while, and then someone sort of like moves it to the next era. Often it's a younger person, it could be an older person, who's just sort of like, or someone who's just always been on the outside, suddenly like it's brought in, and people like suddenly like, well, there's this other person. And that's the thing about that listening party. Like there's just so much music that was happening. That was one of their points, is that all this music was happening at the same time, where there's, we only know like 5 songs from this year, but all these other songs were being made that we don't know. That we're actually as good as any of the things that we know. Like, what makes something rise to the top, and if this other thing had risen to the top, the entire history of music might have been different, if it wasn't the Rolling Stones, but it was like, this other band that no one's heard of, what would that do? What would that do to the whole culture? It's a fascinating question. And then you read a book that that just suddenly just twists the world in a certain way, and it has to be in a way. Like I just read Jenny Erlenbach's Kairos book, East German writer. She's born in the late '60s, went through the whole so born in East Germany, so under communism, under the Stasi. And now she's gone through the wall coming down and coming out, and she's written a lot of books, and she's very well known. But it's a kind of a beautiful book. It just has like this other way of seeing the world, like this other sort of like, it comes from, in some way, from the East German temperament. I mean, I went to a lot of like communist countries back in the day, because I just thought they were so fucking interesting, like a whole nother way of thinking and seeing the world, and just being in the world, like going to countries where there's like no advertising. Like, wow, this is strange. This is like, kind of refreshing, but then there's also no food. There's no anything. It's like, okay, that's. I guess we could live without that too. And like, I don't know. It's just like a whole nother consciousness like that exists parallel to our consciousness. So then to have this sort of blending, having her come and like writing, being a writer that we're reading now, that a lot of people are reading right now, is like really beautiful. So just to read other literatures too. I went to a literary festival in Mexico City back in May, and it was just so beautiful to see like the literature of the world. Like, it's not like there were only a couple people from the United States there, and the rest were just from all over the world. And it's just like the energy, and that we're not like the center of the world here. You know, that there's other, you know, people in Africa are going to be seeing the world very differently. You know, Arab culture is going to see it very differently than we see the world. You know, and
Right.
you know, it's really fascinating to see how stories are told and how they're, you know, what a poem is, and yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
And that aspect, I like that you said this kind of aspect of refreshing, like when you discover something new that somebody pushed a boundary and it worked, like you know, because
Yeah.
obviously people can do that and it fails, but it's like it worked, and you're like, whoa, like that, like this feeling of like, I don't want to say euphoric, but I almost kind of like a euphoric feeling when you discover like, I want to do that, like, or I want to try that, or somebody pushing the limits a little bit, like it just really refreshing. And I guess discovery maybe, like I mean, you know, like we're always searching for this, like I don't know who it was, but somebody said, you know, some writer, of course you always hear things, they're like it's more about discovery than creativity, you know, when you're kind of writing stuff down, you know, you're not so much creating as you are discovering, I guess. I don't know, I mean, what do you think of that, like this?
They had that Jack Spicer quote, that poets think they're pitchers, but they're really catchers.
Right.
You know? That we're just sort of have to be, you know, receptive to the world and open to it. Like, you know, like that Erlenbach book. Yeah, there's a few things that she's doing in there that I would like to try. Like you said, like I would like to be like, I wonder how she did that. Like, and that's why I would always read, like, you know, Beckett, because I still don't know how the fuck he does it. You know,
Master,
like I could read Beckett just like all, you know, for the rest of my life. I've read him for, you know, for 40 years, and I'm still just like, how the fuck is he doing this? You know, I don't really understand it. Whereas other people I can understand very quickly, and that's the thing. I can sort of put it down and walk away, because I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. I get what you're doing. It's cool. And then suddenly I put the book down, and then like 2 months later, I'm like, I never picked that book up again.
Right.
With Beckett, I'm just like, I don't know, what the fuck? From sentence to sentence, I'm like, how is this happening? How is this happening?
Yeah.
How is it like? Why am I crying and laughing in the same breath? You know, like.
Yeah, this is a Beckett podcast. Yeah, we haven't covered him yet, but we plan to eventually. Nice. We mainly haven't covered him because I don't know how to approach it yet. Like maybe we'll get something. So maybe we'll have to have you back on for that.
Sure.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this too, kind of not switching gears, but kind of, you're one of the few living writers to have themselves portrayed in a movie. You know, like most writers have to be dead before that happens, right? I just want to ask, like, what was it like watching someone play yourself on screen? And also, how do you feel about Hollywood kind of doing you dirty by casting Paul Dano as yourself in the movie being Flynn?
Why would that be dirty? He's great. Paul Dano is fucking great.
Of course, yeah. I think he's a great actor. Yeah, I've been like, you know, usually get upcast into like, you know, having like a Brad Pitt figure or something playing yourself. Like, yeah, that's what I look like.
Paul Dano's good looking. What are you talking about? He's like a good guy. He's like
a little autistic.
I was thrilled. I was thrilled to have Paul Dano. Like I was just like, yeah, it couldn't have been better than Paul Dano. Like, no, they were suggesting some sort of like, more conventionally handsome people, I guess you'd say, but like it was really about like, like Paul Dano, could go up against Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. Like, are you fucking kidding? Like he could and I hate to say it, but Leonardo DiCaprio against Daniel Day-Lewis kind of looked like a piece of wood,
right?
Whereas Paul Dano was like fucking a living thing next to Daniel Day-Lewis. So you could do better. Like, it was great. So the whole thing, I wrote a whole book about that. There's a whole book called The Reenactments, which is about the film being made, and it's a longer answer to the question, like what it's like, because I was there on set every day. I was part of the choosing Paul to play me. I met Paul before we went out for lunch right when he signed on, and because he wanted to sort of like check me out, and I was checking him out, like it was like a really interesting. I only knew him from his work, and he seemed like a really he's a smart guy. Like he's like really like a reader and
big music guy too, right? Like,
he's a guy, yeah. He would I'd have his headphones in. I'd ask him what he was listening to. I think he was listening to the Heartless Bastards during that at some point. It was great. It was a wild, strange experience. That's the thing. Like the Another Bullshit Night in Sex City is kind of a common story. It's like everyone's trying to figure out who their parents are. Everyone's trying to figure out who they're, where they come from. Like, why things are like they are. It's a common story in some way. Everyone has some trouble comes to their life at some point. Whereas the reenactments is like completely fucking bonkers. It's like, like you say, like it's not a thing that happens to many people at all, where like, Robert De Niro is going to play your father, right. You get to do this. So it was great. And I just sort of went with it. I just sort of like, did what I do. I just took making films is incredibly boring work, because it's like hours and hours where you're just like waiting for them to move the lights and like waiting for like the one, you do like a page a day or something, maybe 2 pages a day or something. And it's like, it's not a lot of words, and they just sort of like, it takes forever to get that done. And you're sitting around a lot. So I just had notebooks. I was just like writing down everything I was looking at, like, oh, this is interesting. And that sort of, that's how the book came together, really. It was just the process of making a film, and my feelings about it, and feelings about seeing like, Paul Dano, and just these people acting out like these moments of my life, like that are, it's dramatic, so there's a lot of painful moments,
Right.
But they did it with all of them, Julianne Moore as my mother, and De Niro as my.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Board. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavyboard. That's right, Heavy Board is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavyboard.
Father, and Dana was me, and everyone else. My wife was in it. She worked in the shelter. She was a shelter worker, they all just had such integrity. They were like really like artists, like really like taking it really seriously, and like asking me like serious questions, like what is this? They really want to get it right, whatever that means. I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
Get it right. But they wanted to sort of like have it somehow reflect, because none of them had been in a shelter before either, so none of them knew anything about homelessness. So I was like the authority on homelessness, somehow. So. Which makes sense. I did work with the homeless for like 8 years, so I did have some knowledge that they didn't have. So
it's a big part of the story, yeah. But yeah, I just think that's crazy. I just wanted to ask about it, yeah, because having to like watch somebody be like, oh, that's me, like up on the screen. Oh, that's supposed to be my dad, like that, that's.
Well, there were many hints, because there's Paul Dano, and they all would have Nick Flynn written on like there was a trailer in the East Village. On the first day there's a trailer that said Nick Flynn on it, and so I went to go in it, and then a guy stopped me and said, like, I was like, well, I'm Nick Flynn. He goes, no, it's Paul Dano's trailer. It's not your trailer. This is like Paul Dano's trailer. And then there's a body double for Paul Dano, which is also called Nick Flynn. And then there's Nick Flynn. Nick Flynn is like an 8-year-old, and like there are many Nick Flynns around. It was like a whole constellation of us, floating around.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah. Again, that kind of collaboration keeps coming back. Yeah.
That's one of the most collaborative art forms, I'd say. Film,
Have you been approached for doing any of your other stuff in films in terms of your stories or?
Well, I was just in Berlin, and an avant-garde filmmaker named Beth B just took This Is the Night Our House Will Catch Fire. She made a short, and I would say it's an avant-garde film of that book, and then I went and performed it live on stage. Like it was a voiceover of me, and then we took the voiceover out, and I had to like sort of like recite it from memory to these musical cues. It was like very choreographed into musical cues and stuff, like on a live stage with a big projection, like 3 screens behind me projecting the film. So I mean, that was like that was a version of something, yeah. But no other big Hollywood thing has happened so far.
Not yet, yeah.
Well, we'll see.
Your latest book, Low, a collection of poems, and I always like to ask this question to writers: where does the title come from for that? Because I know it's hard to come up with titles for things like that encapsulate an entire book. Like, how did you come up with that? This is the one question I'm asking where I'd be more asking your ideas, right? Than my interpretation.
Well, no, I want to know your interpretation of it. It just seemed like the right title for the book. Like there wasn't a whole lot of thought behind it in a way. It doesn't even come necessarily from anything in the book. Like often there'll be a line from the book, like Some Ether. There's a poem called Some Ether, and the Captain asks for a show of hands. And Blind Huber's a character. I mean, they all sort of have. But the last few books, though, like My Feelings and I Will Destroy You, I gave them both to my editor, and those poems didn't exist. There's poems in those books now called My Feelings and I Will Destroy You. But when I first gave it to him, like they weren't in it, and he was like, "Why are you calling it this? Why are you calling it this?" And so I had to write a poem to justify why I was calling it, My Feelings, which seemed, which was a good thing to do. It was good. And this one, he didn't ask for that. Maybe he just gave up asking me. Like this one is called Low. It just felt like I like all the possible permutations of it, like this sort of positive and negative permutations of it, like low down and low brow and down low, and there's all these sort of like it had like sort of dozens of different like things that went around, that circled around the idea of it. And all of them are just suggesting, something like, I like the idea of it low to the ground, just that it's like something it's very sort of, demotic in that way. Like it's about, it's about being on the earth and stuff. So I think it just felt like the right title for it, really. So yeah.
I love that. It's just because everybody always overthinks this kind of shit, and then I just kind of like, and then all of a sudden it's like, I liked it.
It seemed like the right title for it. And then also the band Low was like a nice thing. So I got to just ask the band Low if I could use one of their lines to start it out. That was fun to do. Are you a fan of Low?
I've never listened to them. No, never.
Oh, you're in for a treat. You got to listen to some Low. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
what
amazing.
Are they like? Are they?
Sort of. It's just a couple. And she just died last year. Mimi Parker died, and now it's just the lead singer is left. His wife died, but the two of them made music for like a long time out of Duluth, Minnesota, and it's just very moody and very sort of like interesting lyrics, and just like it's really great music. Yeah, I love Low. Yeah. That's the thing too. It's almost like it was nice to do that. Like, I mean, my hope was that, we would do a collaboration together. But then his wife died, and he just, I was like, we'll do shows together. Like, I have a book called Low. It's like I sent them the book and stuff, but we'll see.
Absolutely. And the last couple of things, they're more like very writer-centric here, where we like to ask this of writers. What is your writing routine like? What do you like to do in terms of getting your routine or your methods?
I just like to set up the page in some way to know where I'm going the next day. Like so I'm not like sort of just like sloshing around. I like to sort of think like, okay, I would like to be in this world, right? This moment of this world, and see if I can sort of like solve this or work through this thing. So that that's kind of it. It's just sort of like doing a little work, and everything's sort of feeding into it a little bit. But I don't want to be too covered by it, because I do think that like being too immersed in a book is like not healthy. And I would like to like, it seems like it takes away from life in a way. So I try to really like sort of contain it. Like, okay, just get it set up and then go and then be fully present with my family, my friends, with the outdoors, with life, and then come back into it. Sort of have it sort of pulse between those two things. You know, when I'm in it, be fully in it, and then just be able to put it down and leave and not sort of drag it with me everywhere I go. So that's sort of the main thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always interesting because some people have these elaborate rituals, you know, before they sit down, and then other people are just like, cup of coffee in the morning and, you know, go to it. No, nothing special. So it's always just, our listeners like to know that kind of thing because it will vary so widely from writer to writer.
Well, I've you know, shockingly, I haven't had any caffeine for 3 years now. So, and so this might be the first like caffeine-free book. You know, we'll see how it does. You know, I always like to mix it up a little bit. You know.
Absolutely. Why did you stop caffeine? Was it just?
I've stopped it before. Like it's you know, meditation stuff. Like they're kind of like yeah, you know, it is a. It's fun in a way, but it also is like it doesn't really focus you in a certain way. It's sort of like it makes you jangly and stuff. So I don't know how much it helps really. So yeah.
Right. That's great. A little experiment. This is another question we always ask writers. And again, we don't have to get into any numbers or details, but we like to know, how do you make a living? Do you make any money off the literature? Do you have to have a day job? All of that.
Oh no, I definitely have a day job. Yeah, I teach one semester a year down at the University of Houston, and then I teach these workshops. You know, 5-day workshops, different places. You know, I've started like doing my own lately. The last year, I've done a couple of my own, and the writing thing. I mean, the writing is hard to make money off it. Even if I write a memoir and stuff, and like, you know, it takes me like 5 years to write it. You get like, you know, even if you got like $100,000 for it, it's like $20,000 a year. I mean, it's not like, you know, it's not going to keep you afloat, but it is nice. It is nice to have like a little burst of money come in, you know, if they give you that much money. Right. You know, like it's nice to have that come in. But then, you know, taxes, it just goes. It's just, you know, the agent takes the chunk. You know, it's all like, you know, you barely notice it actually after a while. Like it gets folded into the larger, you know, thing. So it's fine. Everything's fine, really. You know, it's fine.
Yeah. We like to ask that just to kind of help dissolve the illusion that people have of all these wealthy writers and like, I'm making millions off of my book because it won an award and No. Any. I mean, you know, it was good. Getting the movie made was definitely a chunk of money. That chunk of money came in from Hollywood, and that was nice. And that money's gone somewhere else now. So yeah. Absolutely. And you said you're doing your own kind of workshops outside of your teaching at University of Houston and all that. Like, is that just something you wanted to do? Like, kind of.
Oh no, I like the workshops a lot. Yeah, I like these workshops a lot. Like I say, I do a lot of my writing in them. So it's just a community thing, and usually it's just sort of by invitation. I just ask people I've worked with before or something if they want to do another thing. I mean, other people could ask if they can be part of it or something, but it's only like 10 people, so it doesn't. It fills up really fast. It's kind of filled up immediately. So.
Your reputation. I was wondering if you had a bunch of crazed fans or something that were like knocking down your door to get in there and stuff. So I know Chuck Palahniuk has that now too, where he's got a lot of fans that are knocking on his door to get, because he runs kind of a private workshop stuff too on his own outside of teaching stuff, and I'm just curious about how that works. And
he's also got like a whole like Substack thing going on.
Right.
And Like you know, that's you know, George Saunders has that too, and I've thought about that, but it seems like a lot of work, you know. Like,
it is.
You know, like you know, my writing energy is like limited, and I sort of want to just put it into the books, you know.
Right.
I'm thinking of writing a book about, you know, the craft of writing, and that would make sense to put it on Substack, because then you can sort of like you're feeding it, you know, it's sort of like you're working through something. It's a different muscle, I think, but maybe not. I'll see. Yeah.
That's it. You talk about a little chunk of change. I mean, it wouldn't be much money, but I bet you'd have a bunch of people signing up from the day you launched it in terms of, oh, Nick Flynn has it. I'd be, please, shut up and take my money meme, like.
That'd be nice. Yeah, but then you have to show up every week. Though. You have to give them something. You have to give them something, and like, I don't know. That seems like a lot of pressure,
Right. Yeah, it's different. It's different than just absolutely.
Yeah. Like right now, like I'm just enjoying what I'm writing right now. I'm just enjoying it because like there's no pressure. No one's waiting for this book. No one knows about this book. No one, it's really just me. Just if I find it, sometimes a couple of weeks can go by. I mean, I try to stay activated in it every day. I mean, that's the thing too, the writing practice, to try to stay activated in it every day. Like if you're on about something, just to do like half an hour a day. At some point in the day, just like open it up, look at it, maybe move a sentence around, just so that you're not like sort of your subconscious isn't like leaving that space completely. I think is really important. And then other days you just do more. Other days you're in it for 3 hours. You do a longer run, So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another question we like to ask writers that come on: what advice would you give to writers out there who are maybe just starting out, maybe trying to build something on their own? What kind of advice would you offer them?
Advice to offer them. I mean, I always love Grace Paley's advice, just low overhead. Her 2-word advice is just, the more you get tied into like, having to pay like a lot of rent or something, the less time you have to write. And it does take a lot of time at the beginning to write. I was very lucky. I had very low rent in Brooklyn in the 90s, all through the 90s. You could still get a cheap place. And I moved in with a friend who had a really cheap place, and we just split the rent. It was like $300 a month I paid. And, now like the rent is like $3,000 a month. It's just like, I don't know. And people haven't like, the wages haven't gone up that much. Like people are making 10 times the money they were making back then. Like what the fuck? Is that even 10? Now it might even be like 100 times. Like what's 3,000 over 300? Is that like? I don't even know what that is. Yeah, I guess that's 10 times, right? That's 10 times.
Add a zero, yeah.
Add a zero 10 times. So. Just to find community, like have a community, have a writing group. I think it's really important to have a writing group, to have a daily practice, which is like, to keep activated in the work, like every day, even for half an hour, just to have some to stay in it, and to read stuff, to have like a thing. It's the same as a Buddhism thing. It's Buddhism, to have a practice it's a tripod, and it's the Sangha, the Dharma, and the daily practice. And the daily practice is the meditation. The Sangha is the group you work with, and the Dharma is the text that you read of other, the folks that came before you. And I think it's the same for writing too. I think it's the same. Just you should keep those 3 legs of the tripod active. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the last couple of questions here we like to ask, because we talked a little bit about how, you're filling your brain with everything you're consuming there, and to kind of, are you reading anything good, watching anything good, listening to anything good? And this could be anything at all, like, garbage reality TV, or, a great book, like, anything like that. Anything that's just bouncing around in Nick Flynn's head kind of right now as he's...
Well, my daughter and I watch a lot of things with my daughter, like, and we did watch some like real garbage this summer. We traveled around. We watched, oh my God, what was it called? Perfect Match, like a reality show of like these beautifully vacant people on like an island. Like, and it was just like, it was kind of like mine. I'm like, wow, like what are we doing watching this? This is so crazy. And then now we rewatched Severance, because she's really into Severance, and she really is dying for the new season of it, which won't come until January. So we watched the first season again, which was very satisfying.
Yeah.
Severance was very satisfying. Like I said, I read that Jenny Erlenbach book. It's the last novel I read, and then I have over on the table over there, I have The Power Broker, Robert Cairo, but it's very intimidating to open that, though. It's like 1,000 pages.
Right.
But it's, now it's my semester off, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is the time to do it. Like this, it's a book that sort of has always circled around me, and I'm sure it's amazing. I just have the sense that it's an amazing book, from all I've heard about it. And I'm going to be reading tomorrow at the Brooklyn Book Festival. I have a gig at the Brooklyn Book Festival, and I'm going to be with Marie Howe. And she has a new book, Collected Poems, out, which is really beautiful. Has her five books of poetry, 4 books of poetry, plus new poems in it. It's a really great book. So
that's fantastic. I love having like a big tome just kind of looming over you, like on the shelf or something, and you just kind of look at it like every once in a while. You're like, I know there's something in there. Like, what?
I did that with Executioner's Song a few years ago, and it was just like so fucking satisfying. It's like such a good book. I was like, okay, now I've done Executioner's Song.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the last one we always ask writers here, what are you working on now? I know you kind of answered this already, but yeah.
I have the book about living on a boat in my 20s. 10 years. I lived on boats, 10, 11, 12 years. I don't know, a long time. I lived on boats, and so it's that sort of like, because there's a question. It's like a question like that, is a question people are always like, like I've always wanted to live in a boat. Like, really? Like, there's a lot to it, There's a lot to it. So, but I can see it. It is a beautiful thing. It was beautiful. Like the days that were beautiful were very beautiful, and the days that weren't beautiful were really hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that was all I had, Nick. I mean, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to do this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks. Great to finally meet you. It's great. Do you still have your partner too?
No. And the world of podcasting, it's a labor of love here. And after about a year of it or so, she was kind of
she moved on.
Yeah, she was like, doing this every week, even every other week. I only do it like bi-weekly, and even then, it's like. I gotta keep it going, like a Substack or something. Yeah, it's like, oh god, like.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm glad. Just let me know when it comes out. When you pull it together. So. Absolutely,
yeah. I'll send you an email with all the links and stuff, and then it's usually a couple weeks delay.
Okay.
But I'll send you an email with all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Great to meet you. Are you in Baltimore right now, or?
I'm in Vegas. I've been living in Vegas the last 5 years, but yeah.
Oh, how's that?
It's great, honestly. Vegas is always one of those things, especially when people write books about it. They're like, oh, I'm going to write about the real Vegas. And it's about these 4 blocks downtown. And they're like, oh, that's the real Vegas. And I'm like, no. This is a city of 2.5 million people. And it's this sprawling suburb where your neighbor is worked as a waiter like their entire life. And they have, make 6 figures, retiring with a pension, has a pool in the backyard. Like, it's not quite... the glitz and glamour of everything that you see in like the movies and all that. And I mean, there is plenty of that, there's plenty of that. And there's plenty of the down and dirty kind of, homeless drug addicts and stuff like everywhere. But like, it's also like, it's really weird vibe. Like, I love the kind of vibe of it. I love the weather of it, even when it gets really hot here and stuff. But we came out here for my wife's career. It was,
nice.
Yeah. So I was, and I was just adjuncting at the time. So it wasn't like I had a career or something holding me somewhere. Yeah. So I adjuncted here for a few years, and then,
Yeah. Now you're making the big bucks doing podcasting.
Oh yeah. I think I'm up to about $20 a month in subscribers or something. But it's a labor of love for sure. But yeah, again, it was an honor to have you on here, Nick. It was just so great to meet you, even through a screen here. And I hope to have you back, and maybe we'll do a Beckett episode or something. And,
yeah. That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. All right, Andrew. Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks, man. See ya.
See ya.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No!
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring.
such a lack of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom, I should say.
Bored. Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.
If you're hearing this, it's because you are listening to the free public feed of Heavy Bored. To get complete, uncensored, uninterrupted, full access to this podcast, become a subscriber at patreon.com/heavybored. That's right, Heavy Bored is made possible by subscribers like you. For less than 1 cup of coffee per month, you will receive private access to uncensored, full-length episodes, Jerk Shop, heavy bonus content, subscribers-only AMA episodes, bonus extended interviews, and more. Come join the conversation today at patreon.com/heavybored.